You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and I'm joined by the Tupelo Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal writer, Michael Katz, the beat writer for Ole Miss Sports. I guess you do baseball and basketball, so we'll just say Ole Miss Sports. You have to understand, this is like the last thing I have to do before I go on vacation for a week, so I'm probably going to struggle in this interview, just so everybody knows. So anyway, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I feel that vacation vibe. Mine starts until like 2 weeks from today, and I'm just fighting for my life right now.
Yeah, my brother-in-law gets into town at noon tomorrow, so I have to get everything wrapped up today so that I can take off a week.
Well, I'll try to make this as painless as I can.
Hey, it's all good. Well, let's start off with some more essentially bad news. But what do you think the biggest traps on the 2024 Ole Miss football schedule is?
Yeah, I know that a lot of the talk, nationally and around the beat has been, this is a manageable Ole Miss schedule, all things considered. When you look at the gauntlet that an SEC schedule can be and has been, for Ole Miss in recent years. That being said, they're going to be favored in the majority of their games. We'll see what happens with Oklahoma. And Georgia, again, there's a lot, season has to be played, but that might be a game that they're not favored in, but they should be favored in every other game they play. But, for me, it's road games. Road games in the SEC are just weird things just kind of happen, especially on those teams, with those teams you don't play particularly consistently. South Carolina, Florida, again, those are teams that Ole Miss should be favored. They'll probably be favored by double digits. Florida, who knows what's going to be happening there? They might be under an interim coach. Billy Napier might be coaching for his job. Who knows? They have that they have the hardest schedule in the country by most metrics. So, but again, playing on the road in the SEC, it's brutal, and those are tough places to play. Again, on paper, they shouldn't be a problem, but man, you just never know. And I know this is an Ole Miss team that's tested. This team has played on the road in tough places. It's not like they're going to be, afraid of the moment or anything like that. But SEC road games, man, it's just weird things happen.
Yeah, Jaxson Dart has started on the road in Tiger Stadium with Ole Miss undefeated. So with that place juiced, he's seen that environment. But the game that has kind of got my attention now, I think the Fayetteville, Arkansas game at 11 o'clock in the morning, I think they did Ole Miss a huge favor that is not at night. But on the flip side of that, I think the South Carolina game has now been raised up to be a little bit more at least trap adjacent, because I do not think South Carolina is going to be a particularly good football team.
Agreed.
But going in there is probably going to be a night game. You're going to catch them in the fifth game of the season where they're at least 2-2, to where they still have hope. And they've already played a couple of SEC games. They're extremely juiced, no pun intended, about Juice Wells coming back to South Carolina. The people in that state are kind of losing their mind with the thought of Juice Wells coming back. And I'm like, hey, listen, Juice was injured. He had surgery when he got to Ole Miss. He did not take you for a ride. It's okay. They just will not listen to it.
Yeah, no, it's I've heard that is a really tough place to play at night. Again, never been. I'm excited for that. SEC stadiums have always been sort of a bucket list of mine, so it's really, really cool that I get to see all these different places. But like you said, so much of what they did last few years has been very Spencer Rattler dependent, and he is no longer there. It's gonna be really interesting to see what that team looks like without him. But night game there, who knows? Weird things happen. Speaking of weird things happening, weird things always happen against Arkansas. A game in Fayetteville, I don't think has ever been normal. Now, like you said, though, getting that game earlier in the day, I really think is a favor for Ole Miss, because that place, One, last time I was there, it was absolutely freezing, which it's impossible to predict that right now. But two, they get juiced up at night. So I think that's a favorite. That's always a weird game. Maybe it evens out a little bit with it being during the day. First thing.
Yeah, I've seen Arkansas score a touchdown when they were kicking off to Ole Miss in that game.
Yeah, no, yeah, I've been here for 3 Arkansas games. My first one was the failed 2-point conversion at the end of regulation from KJ Jefferson. Then there was the game where Ole Miss was down like 20-something, 30-something points, and they scored like 25 points in the fourth quarter, and it kind of got weird. And then last year's was a weird game too, so you just never really know.
Well, what do you think that fans should be paying attention? Let's say when practice first starts out, when they first start going, what do you think fans need to be paying attention to right off the start?
I think if we're looking at this team again from a broad perspective, I think there's things that we think we know, right? We think we know what you're getting out of Jaxson Dart. We know what you're getting out of the receivers. You know what you're getting out of that defensive line. It's gotten beefed up. And they're not bad questions, but I think I'm curious to see what the offensive line looks like. How that mixes, because you've got so many guys coming back, but you brought in a bunch of new pieces as well. How does that all mix and match? And maybe that's something that takes a few games too. Hypothetically, you've got a few games to figure it out before you're going to need your quote unquote starting 5. But I think for me, it's that, and I'm really curious to see the defensive backfield. Again, a lot of new pieces there, a lot of new corners. You've got a lot of excitement about the athleticism and the length and all these things that Pete Golding has said he puts a lot of value in his secondary. How do all of the pieces fit? Again, you've got some returning pieces there. A corner, and it's not one of those places. But a lot of new pieces. How does it all come together? What are the combinations? The transfer portal has given and has taken in the same cycle. You've had guys come in, be here for the spring game, and then they're out. So I'm curious to see what that all looks like on those two groups. Again, I think I know what you're going to see from the defensive line and the wide receivers and the quarterback. Running back too, I think is interesting too. What's the timeshare look like there? We've gotten so used to we saw Quinshon Judkins carry so much over the last 2 years, maybe not as much this past year, a little bit more Ulysses Bentley, but is this going to look more like, is it going to be one guy, or is it going to be like when Snoop and Jerry and Ely and Henry Parrish, who's now back, was there? Is it going to be kind of a timeshare situational thing? So I think those are the things that I'm personally looking at.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first and listen every day. When we come back, we'll get Michael's opinion on if everything goes right and Ole Miss wins the national title, what happened? We're going to talk to him in just a second. But first, I do want to let you know, Gametime is your place to get MLB tickets with the killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Now, they have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. They've got all of these things that give them one of the best customer service suites in the entire ticketing industry. You can take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets, MLB tickets, NFL tickets with Gametime. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, news, opinions, all streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Michael. This is really interesting, but if Ole Miss wins the national championship, whenever fan, you're doing like pie in the sky thinking if Ole Miss wins the national championship, what went right for them this year besides everything?
I think that the easy answer is like the defense got better, right? Or that the defense took the steps that it needed to take and turned into an elite unit. And I think that is true. I think that is going to have to happen. But for me, you don't want to put pressure on one guy, and it's not all about one guy. But I think that if Ole Miss wins the national championship, Jaxson Dart was a first-team All-SEC caliber player and in the Heisman conversation. Because, listen, he's the trigger man. He is in charge of everything that happens on offense. He's the distributor. He made such good decisions last year. He kept the ball out of harm's way. Now you need him to do that, but be even more explosive. You got all these playmakers coming back. You've got new playmakers there. There's probably going to be some games where it is a shootout. The LSU game last year, you might have more. You never want those because you never want to be giving up 670 yards or whatever it was, but you never know when that kind of game is going to break out. You need to be ready for it. So, you just look at the teams that have won national championships recently, and, maybe Michigan last year is a little bit different because they were such a different style from what we've seen in recent years without, a Heisman. I mean, J.J. McCarthy's a very good quarterback, maybe not a guy who put up insane numbers. But, you look at the Joe Burrow years and, Alabama's had really good quarterbacks. And, you look at them too. Milrow's probably going to have a really good year for them to be really good too. Michael Penix is the reason that Washington was playing for a national title last year. I think it's, in college, I think you used to be able to get away with having a quote unquote game manager. And I think under some circumstances you can. But I think
AJ McCarron.
Yeah, exactly. But even McCarron towards the end became like a dude. Mm-hmm. I think that, the days of the Greg McElroy types, I don't think you can do that anymore. I think offenses are so quarterback predicated that if your quarterback isn't throwing for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns, you probably didn't have the season that you wanted. And all signs point to Dart being able to do all of those things. And I think that if he is the guy who is a first-team All-SEC caliber player, I know the voting is who knows what happens with that. But if he has a year where you say that's the best quarterback in the SEC, I think Ole Miss does the things that it wants to do.
It's really interesting to me. This is another thing that honestly helps Jaxson Dart and is going to make him reach those goals if he does it, is the fact that Ole Miss might have their best wide receiving core that they have ever had. And that is include a wide receiving core that had DK Metcalf and AJ Brown.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you look at the production coming back, the production that you have coming in. I mean, you've got a first-team All-SEC guy coming in to a group that already had a guy who he would have had 1,000 yards if he was fully healthy last year, and Trey Harris, who averaged 18 point something yards a carry. Jordan Watkins, who's been one of the most reliable receivers in college football the last couple years, and the best tight end in the SEC, and Caden Prescorn, who was also hurt for part of last year, who now you're thinking, gosh, what is he going to do when he's 100%? I mean, the weapons are insane. And so I think Jaxson is, and he did a really good job of this last year, was not over, pressing the issue and taking what teams gave him and following the offense and not trying to be a hero. There were a few here and there where that happens, and, risk takers take risks, and that happens, but he did a really good job in the most part for not being that guy. And I think that with those weapons, they're going to be open. I mean, you're going to have guys that are going to be in position to make plays, play inside the offense, and, no one schemes it up better than Lane. You're going to be in a pretty good spot to put up the numbers that I think that are going to have him in some pretty elite company.
Yeah, one thing that I think that fans should pay attention to pretty early in August, whenever they have an opportunity to see open spring practices and all of that, is Deion Smith. Where is he? And if you have 4 wide receivers and you play 3, which one of these potential all SEC players is sitting there watching at the beginning, because I think that is an interesting thing, because Deion Smith, he is the best thing that happened to Trey Harris in this whole cycle that he's been in college, because Trey Harris, according to PFF, is number one in the country when dealing with some single coverage. Deion Smith makes him undoubleable. You can't put single coverage on both of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's, and again, I think it adds variance to the sort of bodies of the pass catchers you have, right? Like Trey Harris is a specific body type. It's different than Jordan Watkins. Juice Wells is, he's a good size guy, but he's not Trey Harris. You think of Trey Harris as a lengthy, big time guy. I think that when you add a guy like Deion Smith, he's probably a similar-ish body type. I think when you have guys that you can't just focus, if you know that they need to make a play and you double Trey Harris, someone's going to be open, and that's going to be a problem. So, you always wonder, are there too many cooks in the kitchen? How are you going to keep everybody happy? But Ole Miss has done a really good job these last few years of keeping people happy. And I know that's always a question with transfer portal when you bring guys in of how do you keep everybody happy when everybody wants the ball? But for the most part, and they've done a really good job of keeping people satisfied with the production and staying committed to, I know Matt Corral used to say, keep the main thing the main thing. They've done a really good job of that.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal. What have you got going on, buddy?
Man, it's it's still catching up on some of the track and field stuff. I talked to one of the national champions this last week, Tarek Robinson O'Hagan, a super fascinating kid. He just won the shot put title again. He won indoor as well. As you know, the Ole Miss women's 4x100 team just won a national championship, the first relay in Ole Miss women's history. They have a superstar on there named Mackenzie Long, who is up for the best track and field athlete in the country. So I've been kind of focusing on that kind of stuff. Obviously there's a UFL game this weekend that involves the quarterback who may or may not be, I don't think we know how much Matt Corral is going to play. He did a pretty good job the other day off the bench, but I'm going to be watching that. And then just, kind of looking ahead to, I'm going on vacation in a little bit, but when I come back, the media days are starting right up, I think 3 days after I get back. So it's about to get real. So enjoying a little bit of downtime, but, staying on top of on some of the stuff that, maybe during the busy part of the year slips through the cracks a bit.
Are you going to Dallas?
I sure am.
Okay. This is the question. I know that the SEC is going to lean into it. They just absolutely are with this SEC Media Days being in Texas. How many cowboy hats over under?
Ooh. Are they going to make the coaches wear them?
Oh,
I don't know if you remember.
Could you picture Lane Kiffin wearing a cowboy hat?
I bring this up because, I was at SC when Lane was there and when they went to the Sun Bowl and he had to wear the sombrero. I don't know if you've ever seen that picture, but I highly recommend the Lane Kiffin sombrero when they made him put it on when the team arrived at the airport. An all-time moment in Lane Kiffin lore. I implore everybody to go look that up. Maybe it'll be a sombrero. Or maybe we'll wear one of those Deion Sanders big ass hats. We've a lot of potential here.
Yeah, should be really interesting. But you're right. Media days, I am absolutely ready to get going because I've got a couple of weeks. I'm off next week and I'm off like 2 weeks after that. Like 2 out of 3 weeks I'm taking off. But when I come back, it's go because honestly, this is the most anticipated football season in the history of Ole Miss football. So if you're not all go now, you're not ever going to be all go.
Yeah, no, it's and there's so many storylines too at this particular SEC Media Days. It should be awesome. And I'm sure there will be no passive aggressive coach stuff. Absolutely not. Never.
Yeah. And there are probably no shade thrown at the Big Ten or the big All-State Conference or whatever they're calling it. The All-State 12.
The Globe Life Conference.
Yes. Somebody, by the way, I'll let you go in just a second. Somebody on Twitter won Twitter yesterday, and they said that the Big 12 should be sponsored by Southwest Airlines, and they should be the Southwest Conference.
Oh, that'd be amazing, actually. That would be incredible.
Yeah.
I just, I hope that the Southwest figures out its Boeing plane situation before that they make that happen.
Yeah.
The Southwest has had some bad PR recently, but that's a good way. That would be a good way to get back in the good graces.
Yeah, the Southwest Conference. I'm here for that. Let that happen.
100%.
All right. Take care, Michael, and thanks, bud.
All right. Talk to you later.